Okay, well, welcome students, family, and friends to our McDermond Medal presentation, the highest honor given by the McDermond Center for Management and Entrepreneurship. A special welcome to our recipient's family today, wife and also DePaul alumna, Casey, and her father, longtime local business owner, Keith Brackney. Welcome also to all of our alumni guests that are dialing in and listening in and watching on Zoom. We had a record number of alums signing up to be on today as well. So welcome them. We appreciate you being here. Also, I want to thank Alumni Engagement and Development, especially Zaida Banassi, for co-sponsoring today's event. A heartfelt welcome to recently retired McDermond Center legend, Sandy Smith, who has been a big cheerleader for our recipient today since I've been here in the last 6 years. So I got to know David through Sandy a lot. Also, a big welcome to Professor Gary Lemon, who will never retire, probably, who was the director of the McDermond Center and Management Fellows Program when our recipient was as college students. Lastly, and my hand's shaking, so I'm trying to read like that. So, a final welcome to Dr. Lori White, 21st President of DePaul University, who will present the McDermond Medal at the end of the program today. For those of you that don't know me, I am Steve Foudy, Director of the McDermond Center and Executive Director of the Hubbard Center for Student Engagement. But now we want to turn to our speaker today. We welcome David Trogden. David graduated from DePaul University in 2004 with a degree in economics. During his time as a student at DePaul, David was on the cross-country and track and field teams, a member of the Phi Delta Theta fraternity, the Randall L. Wilson Award recipient for top economics major. He also graduated magna cum laude. David went on to earn his MBA from Indiana University Kelley School of Business in 2009. During his successful year so far, and we're all waiting to see what the next chapter is, and maybe he is too, he may tell us, but David has worn many and various hats as a private equity executive, hired gun, garage entrepreneur, CEO, board member, financier, advisor, mentor, faith-driven investor, and philanthropist. David ran a private equity-backed business at the age of 29. He founded and chaired Provo Medical in 2014 and sold it to Avista Capital Partners in 2022. Today, Provo Medical has over 400 employees, 12 acquisitions that have been completed, and the company has orchestrated 2 private equity exits. Today, David has transitioned from entrepreneur to investor. Whether he is an advisor, board member, or funder, he plans on living at the intersection of explosive growth, which I love, and meaningful purpose, which I also love. David is also husband, father, disciple, friend, family adventurer, international traveler, thrill seeker, RV enthusiast. I forgot to look. Did you come up in the RV? No. Okay. I was looking for possibly an RV on Seminary or Hannah, but not today. Okay. Lost my place now. Soccer coach, thrill seeker, lifelong learner. Attest to every DePaul student is a lifelong learner when they graduate. That's awesome. He's also CrossFitter, Boston Marathon qualifier, pontoon boat captain, and probably the most important, girl dad to daughters Grace and Summer, who are rooting will be future Tigers. Yes. David has been honored by the Indianapolis Business Journal as a member of the 40 Under 40 that recognizes business leaders and change makers in the greater Indianapolis area. His startup, Provo Medical, was also recognized by Inc. magazine at number 476 in the Inc. 5,000, 476 out of 5,000 as the fastest growing companies in 2019 as well. David currently serves on the board of directors of the Indianapolis Zoological Society. Okay, that's a lot. That's why we're here today. So it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce today's speaker and award recipient, David Trogden. Yes. go. It's showtime.
All right. Quite the intro.
Yeah. Turn that up or use this one. You want to walk around, or I can go back in the back and turn it up a little bit too.
Sure. All right. I think the only thing we were lacking was like walk-up music. Next time. I'm AC/DC, I think. So when Steve Foudy first told me I was going to be the McDermott Award winner, my first thought was, not sure what the criteria is, but he does realize that I'm a stay-at-home dad now, right? I'm only sort of kidding. And my second thought was, who's won this award in the past? So I looked it up. I was pleasantly surprised to see two of my former bosses were award recipient medal winners in the past. One, Jim Emerson, who I did my internship with while I was here at DePaul. Yes, Mr. Emerson. And you might recognize that name. It's kind of plastered around DePaul, the Emerson name. Second was Al Hubbard, who I had my first job with out of DePaul. The Hubbard Center. Yeah, that's Al. And the next name I saw was Judson Green, the Green Center for the Performing Arts. And my only logical conclusion was they give you a medal, and then they name a building after you. So Dr. White, in case you're wondering, I really like the ring of the Trogden Family Library. I mean, I don't know who Roy O. West is, but like... Oh, yeah. I hear you. So, all joking aside, this award means a lot to me, more than you'd ever know. You see, I grew up a poor kid from Kentucky and came to DePaul, arrived on campus in 2000, not only not knowing anybody that had ever gone to DePaul. I actually found my DePaul ID, believe it or not. Casey wonders why I keep all this stuff down in the basement. But man, as I came here, I applied to the Management Fellows Program kind of on a whim, just because I happened to get the application on Christmas break and I didn't have anything better to do. I was intrigued by business, but I honestly didn't know a single business person from my hometown of Owensboro, Kentucky. And man, did that change quick. Really through the Management Fellows lecture series and the different business leaders that were brought to DePaul, I really got a firsthand view of what it's like to run a business. I met with the founder of Ticketmaster and the CEO of Best Buy, and every time a speaker would come to campus, they give the students an opportunity to meet individually or in small groups, and I volunteered every single time. By the way, you guys should do that too. And I remember one time, actually, I got a chance to meet Ben and Jerry, which was really cool. And ironically enough, Ben and Jerry actually wrote a book about running a values-led business. And as much as I'd like to say that encounter, planted the seeds for what is this lecture today, that's not exactly how it went down. I actually remember, so we had a meeting, small group, and there at one point in time, it was just Ben, Jerry, and I, the three of us, standing around a table. I think it might have been in this room. And I was prepared. I had all kinds of questions ready to ask, about their entrepreneurship, about growth, about the challenges that they had. And I asked my first question, and one of them farted. I'm not sure which one. And so undeterred, I kept going at it, ask another question, and then it happened again. There'd be a pause, and then 3 seconds later, there'd be this wretched smell. And I don't know if it was Ben, I don't know if it was Jerry, it might have been both of them. I mean, they're both kind of hippies. They have a lot of dairy in their diet, but one of those dudes is lactose intolerant, I'm telling you. But even that encounter gave me a little bit of confidence, right? That Ben and Jerry are like household names. They're titans of business, and they're just people too. And I can honestly say that my DePaul experience, really meeting with all these entrepreneurs and CEOs, it lit a fire for me. And I really had clarity basically at the age of 18 that I wanted to run a business. And when you have, and really that clarity set me on a path to be able to run a business before I was 30. Bill Gates, if you've ever seen this quote, famously said that most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10. And that was absolutely true for me. So having clarity at such a young age, it's really not that hard to break down the steps to ultimately accomplish whatever that goal is. I mean, for me, having a desire to be an entrepreneur, to run my own business, I mean, it's about seeking out entrepreneurs and having conversations. It's personal education, doing my MBA, lots of books. It's just networking around. And I knew that, and I did a lot of work to get there over those 10 years. The hard part, I don't think, is actually figuring out what you need to do to accomplish your goals. I think the hard part is actually figuring out what you want to do and having that clarity. So I have a couple thoughts for you guys on that. First off, and for anybody that, like, who knows what they want to be when they grow up? Who doesn't know what they want to be when they grow up, right? All right. A lot of people, thanks, Casey. A lot of people don't. So a couple things I do. First, get to know yourself, right? And this goes beyond just your strengths and weaknesses. Like, how are you uniquely wired? And there's a lot of assessments you can do, Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, Strengths Finders. Do them all, right? Every one gives you a little bit of glean into how you can show up and how you're just you, right? The second step is, kind of having that knowledge about your strengths and kind of who you are. Start to hypothesize what you think you might want to be, right? And this is just an exercise of being curious. It's talking to your professors. It's meeting with speakers that come to DePaul. It's talking to your friends' parents and what they do. Just be curious and think about where a potential profession, potential company might align up with how you're wired. And then the third, which is by far the most important thing, which most people don't do, talk to the people that are doing what you think you might want to do, right? And that sounds so simple, but it's the forgotten step in this. And, and it doesn't even matter what you want to be. Like, let's say you want to be a zookeeper. Great, right? This is what you do. You go on LinkedIn, you type in zookeeper, you type in DePaul alum, and you reach out to them. You say, hey, I'm a dumb college kid. Like, I want to talk to you about zookeeping. Like, can we have an hour phone call? Or better yet, can I show up at your zoo and spend half a day, like, hanging out and seeing what life in a zookeeper is like? And you do that, and you find out the monkeys really do throw poop, and you decide you don't want to be a zookeeper anymore, right? That's fantastic. That's equally as important to know what you don't want to do. And then you go back to the drawing board thinking about yourself and thinking about and hypothesizing what your next opportunity and career could be, and then going and talking to those people. That's it. Those are the 3 steps. And I promise you, if you could spend an hour a day at this point in your life as an 18 to 22-year-old, 5 hours a week, you are going to be in the top 1% of your graduating class in terms of opportunities, in terms of clarity on where you want to go. But you've got to do the work. All right, I'll get off my soapbox now. Because actually this talk is not about being what you want to be when you grow up. It's about living a values-led life. I chose this topic really because as good as I was at having some clarity on what I wanted to be, I was equally bad at knowing what my own values were. I never did this in college, right? I never sat down and thought about what was most important to me, and then how I was going to utilize as a filter for opportunities and what I was and wasn't willing to compromise. That's why I chose this topic. And today I'm going to share a little bit of my story and at different times where I was and wasn't aligned with those values, whether I had defined them or not. But first I want to get you guys in on the action. So I have a list of values in front of you. Take a look at that. And I, by the way, this is like the cardinal rule of public speaking, to not give something distracting to your audience while you're talking. And I'm not only giving you something to look at, I'm also asking you to do work, right? So I literally, as I'm sitting here talking, what I want you to do is circle 10 to 15 to 20 of those values at the top. And then as a second step, I want you to group those values together in maybe 4 to 6 themes. And those themes really can become and should become a rough draft, your first draft of your own core values. I'd like you to do that today. And if you're on Zoom, please play along as well. Take a picture of the this slide and work on it as well. All right. So I'm going to pick up my story, actually back at DePaul. I had a phenomenal DePaul experience. Like Steve said, I was a management fellow, econ major, Phi Delt, ran cross country. I actually like to show this picture of cross country because it shows all the people behind me, including that pack of Wabash guys. And like, believe I was actually a very average Division III runner, and believe me, there were plenty of people in front of me, but this vantage point does not show that. As I think back at DePaul, my time at DePaul, I worked hard, I got good grades, but my takeaways weren't specific to a class necessarily. I think I really have 2 primary takeaways from my time at DePaul. The first is just embracing leadership opportunities. And this is where you have a very, very unique experience here. You literally have to try to not be a leader. Like between all the Greek system and your living units and the small classes and the clubs, like you're gonna get voluntold to do something at some point in time. And my encouragement to you is not to wait for that moment, but to go seize it, right? To volunteer for those opportunities. For me personally, I was president of my fraternity, Phi Delt, for a year. And at the time, I equated being president of a fraternity to really being a professional babysitter. Having now run a couple of businesses, and I actually equate that experience to kind of being a professional babysitter. So I got the reps in, right? Really in an experimental kind of no risk zone here in college that really gave me the confidence to be a leader later in life, and that started here. The second is just around building relationships, right? And that's the friendships, that's the memories that you have here at DePaul. And it's not just Little Five and Monon. If you're anything like me, those were the fuzziest memories. But it's the random Tuesday night when you're hanging out with your friends, playing cards, drinking Dr. Thunder and eating Skittles. Now I'm telling you, 20 years later, I actually had my 20-year reunion this summer. 20 years later, my favorite weekend of the year, every year, is that same group of guys getting together at my house, Memorial Day weekend, and we literally play cards till 4 a.m, and we get Dr. Thunder and eat Skittles, right? Like it's awesome. And it's not just the memories, relationships, it's also the network, right? The DePaul network for me has just been phenomenal. My first internship, my first job came from the DePaul network. I bought a house in Broad Ripple, shortly after graduating. All my friends moved in from DePaul. It became kind of the halfway house for recovering Phi Delts. But we had a blast, by the way. And 5 of my groomsmen, my best man, were all DePaul alums. And professionally, when I started my business, 3 out of my first 8 employees. I had a small army of DePaul interns come through over the years. And even outside of employees, I mean, my advisors, my banker, investment banker, lawyer, financial advisor, mentors, I really built my business on the back of the DePaul network. And that starts with building the relationships here, right? So what am I asking you to do here at DePaul? Embrace leadership opportunities, build relationships, and then the third, the one I didn't do, define your core values. By the way, I forgot the most important relationship. I met my wife, Casey, here. And Casey is actually from Greencastle, so I did marry a townie. And we have two beautiful girls. We live in Indianapolis now. That was definitely the best relationship that came from DePaul. So again, selecting your core values. After DePaul, I went to work for Al Hubbard, E&A Companies, which was kind of like a holding company private equity group that owned and operated a number of small businesses. My initial role was going out and trying to find small businesses for his group to acquire. And, I always, again, even at that point, 22 years old, I was audacious enough to say, hey, I'd love to run a business someday. And they knew that from day one. We ended up buying a business in 2008 out in California, which sold refurbished medical equipment, of all things. I didn't know a thing about that going into it, with a primary focus on ultrasound systems. And we hired a president to run that business. And long story short, he didn't work out. And Al and his partner, Devin, said, all right, here's your chance. And they promoted me to president at the age of 29, not knowing what the hell I was doing. But at that point, the business was really a turnaround. And we turned it around and really grew the company, successfully sold the business to a private equity group in 2013. And, we had a lot of success at this business called Ultra Solutions in California. But there was one thing that, as I thought about it, that really irked me. And it was around the culture of the business. And it's not that we had a bad culture. It's that we didn't really have one, right? Like if you went into the office, you went into the warehouse, you walked around, like there wasn't a vibe. There wasn't a consistent energy through the organization. And I didn't know why that was. Candidly, I didn't know how to fix it. But I knew with my next business, I wanted it to be different. So after we sold that business, I knew I wanted to run another company. And I had been with Al and his group for about a decade. And I was ready to do it on my own. I wanted to do it myself. And if you want to run a business, there's really only three ways. You can start a business, you can buy a business, you can convince somebody to let you run their business. And I was candidly kind of looking at all three of those, with starting a business being the last. And of course, that's what I did. What happened? Opportunity knocked, right? So some of the relationships that I had from the old industry that I was in, refurbished medical equipment, I got a phone call one day, and a guy said, hey, I want to sell you 200 ultrasound probes, or the wands that work with the ultrasound systems. And I told him I was, out of the business. I was probably going to go personally acquire a company. And he said, but my relationship's with you. I want you to buy these. So, all right, I'll take a look. And I looked it up, kind of figured that they were worth a couple $100,000. And I called him back and asked him what he wanted. And he said $100,000. And so I wired pretty much our life savings the next day and incorporated Probo Medical, right? And that's the start. And that equipment came into my garage, and in the process of starting to reach out to old customers and suppliers that I had worked with my previous company, like my little garage business really took off and got to a point it was probably doing $100,000 in revenue a month. I was like, oh crap, I've kind of got a real business here. And but before I went all in, right, and started to hire employees, get a warehouse, there's something I wanted to do first. And you see, in my time in between businesses, I spent a lot of time reading, kind of reflecting, and I came around to this definition of culture, of a company's culture. And to me, it's simply a company's culture is simply a reflection of its core values. Let me repeat that. A company's culture is simply a reflection of its core values. And that was the light bulb moment, right? Thinking back to the first business I ran, we didn't have a great culture because we never defined what we stood for. There was, we would hire people just based on their resumes, not based on their own unique skill sets and a vibe and an energy that we wanted to build within the business. Our goals and objectives were all financial in nature, right? We didn't have some higher purpose to exist as a business beyond just making money. We were going through the motions, but without a North Star to really guide those actions. And I wanted to do that differently. So before I hired one employee, I spent the time and energy to think about what I wanted to build within Probo. And I set out our core values. So first, Probo, the company name, is actually a Latin root for having strong principles, integrity. Pro bono is, kind of comes from that root. And so what's that mean? Like a lot of companies say they have high integrity. For us, just one example, we told our people they couldn't lie. And that seems like super straightforward and obvious, but remember, we're running a business and an industry. It's kind of like used car dealerships for medical equipment, right? So we got lied to on a daily basis. We didn't allow our people to lie. Urgency was a value. And this started with the interview process. I mean, when we were interviewing people, if they were super communicative and responsive when we were setting up the interview, like they moved to the top of the list, like literally if they responded within minutes. And part of that was the nature of our business. We were in a highly responsive, our customers would send in a request, and if we didn't respond within a matter of minutes, sometimes we lost the order. So that was super critical, especially we also ran an entrepreneurial-led business, right? Like we moved super fast, and we needed people that not only could live in that environment, that embraced it. We had an emoji as a core value. We literally had a smiley face. And one interpretation of that was we hire people that use smiley faces in their communication, literally. Some people call this the no asshole rule. And it's this funny thing, like if you hire pleasant people, then you create a pleasant work environment. It's kind of funny. This is a selfish one because I wanted to go to work every day in a place that I enjoy going to work. The final core value that we had was that people matter. And that started unequivocally with how we treated our people. But we also took the interpretation that that's people outside our walls. And we set up a donation program. Remember, we're dealing with medical equipment, where we ended up donating hundreds of ultrasound systems throughout the world. Haiti, Central, South America, Africa. Very proud of that. All right. So we talked about the values. How did we actually do as a company, right? There's probably some indication that we had success, because otherwise I wouldn't be up here. But it kind of starts with the people, right? When you build a value-led business that is intentional about its culture, and you bring people into the fold that fit that mold, then it organically builds, right? And I'm very proud that we were rated one of the best places to work multiple years within the state of Indiana. We also balanced that people focus with high growth. And like hyper growth. I mean, we're doubling the size of the business every year organically. And we're ranked the second fastest growing company in the state of Indiana in 2019, I believe. And then we had a super strong management team. And we built an infrastructure in our business systems and processes that were way beyond the size of our company. And then our opportunity within our industry, and this is, all things medical equipment, aftermarket service, repair, refurbishment, resell, super large industry, multi-billion dollars, and was made up of a lot of mom and pops. So we saw that there's going to be this consolidation wave, and we had the audacity to think that we could be the platform to do this. So we bought two businesses while I still owned 100% of the company, and could have continued kind of that path of buying a business maybe a year, but the opportunity was bigger than that. So in 2018, we brought in a private equity partner, kind of a financial partner. I sold the majority of the business. And over the next 3.5 years, we bought 10 more companies, ended up selling the company again in 2022. And it's like the business now, Probo, it's unrecognizable from where it started in my garage less than 10 years ago. I mean, there's 800 employees. It's a global operation. We sponsor a soccer team in the UK. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. But it's just unrecognizable in both good and bad ways. Now, as you've probably deduced already, I'm no longer with the business. And for me, when we brought in the financial partner, we added a value. And it was money, right? We knew that going into it. Like private equity, it's about money. It's about your financial return. So it's no longer about probo, urgency, smiley face, people matter. It was more about your EBITDA and multiple on invested capital and IRR. Like that's the language we lived in. And even though I hadn't gone through the process yet of truly defining my own core values, I knew money wasn't it, right? Money's not a value for me. And because of that, I'm probably not the right guy to run a private equity-backed business that's the number 1, 2, and 3 objective. So I left after about a year, so at the end of 2019, and I guess effectively sort of retired at the age of 37, but believe me, I stay plenty busy. So when I left, remember I was working 70, 80 hours a week for probably a decade in building 2 businesses, and I went full reverse, and we bought an RV and traveled the countryside for 4 months. My girls had just turned 3 and 5, and we've done a number of small trips since then. We've now been to 48 states in the RV. We're actually going to Alaska this summer, not in the RV, but we're doing an Alaskan cruise, and that'll be all 4 of ours 50th state, including my 7-year-old, who's now will have been to 50 states, which I think is pretty cool. But it was really after this big trip that, and it kind of coincided with COVID, and that I locked myself in the basement. I'm like, all right, like what's next? Thinking I'd probably run another business, but wanted to, had a lot of opportunities, but I didn't have a great filter. Like, how am I going to filter these opportunities? And now this was for the first time, even though I had done it with my business, that I sat down and like, all right, what are my own personal core values? And this is what I came up with. I added a couple from your list, by the way. Family, faith, relationships, exceptionality, sincerity, adventure, giving back. So I not only defined these values, I spent some time kind of retroactively thinking about how I had been living my life. Let's take exceptionality for an example. That's my theme, right, for a couple different things. Ambition, right? I'm an achiever. That's my number 1 strength, right? And Strengths Finders. Goal orientation, like that's what exceptionality was to me. And when I was running a business, it was a 10 out of 10, right? Like I'd jump out of bed at 4 in the morning, ready to go conquer goals. And I lived it. I loved it. But at the same time, some of those other values that, and again, in retrospect, family, faith, relationships, really took a back burner to that exceptionality value. And as I really thought about it, I was never a bad husband. I was never a bad father, but I knew where the bar was, and I was slightly above the bar. And as I think about my business, there's no way I would have accepted being slightly above the bar in my business. Why was I slightly above the bar in these other areas that unequivocally were more important than my business? It was hard. It was hard working through that. And ultimately what that meant was I kind of needed to redefine what exceptionality meant. What does it mean to wake up and achieve? And if it's not just about the business, because I'm not in a spot to go jump back into another business right now. So once you have your values, I advise taking 2 additional steps. The first is defining your guiding principles. So this is actually your homework, right? I want you guys have been steadfast in working on your values while I've been talking. Good job. What I want you to do is now take those values and pretend that there's a camera following you around what does that mean? Like, how are you living out these what are the exact actions that you're taking on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to live out that value? These are your guiding principles. And I have a worksheet that kind of walks you through that. And then also have a sample of mine. If those are on Zoom, reach out to me. I'm happy to send you this as well. The second thing I want you to do is do a weekly check-in. So for me, it's every Monday morning. I have a time where it's on my calendar, and I look at my values and my guiding principles, and I'm like, am I doing this? Am I living this? Am I walking the talk? And initially, when I started doing this, one that stood out for me was, my sincerity value, which for me encompasses authenticity, just showing up as myself, but also being humble. And at different times, like especially high achieving, goal oriented person, like I could kind of turn on any face that I wanted to turn on to get to my goal, which kind of helped me lose myself at times. And I've had to work on it. And it's those sessions Monday thinking about my previous week that has really shown light on where I can do a better job. Something that's helped is my girls have gotten older. Their current nickname for me is Big Fat Stinky Daddy Dude. So it's kind of hard to have a big head when you get called that a couple dozen times a day. But it's still something I continue to work on. So why is this important to you? I just told you that I waited until I was 40 to define my own personal core values. Why do you think I'm talking to you guys now about this? Why is it important, 18 to 22? Anybody want to take a stab? Why do you think now? Now's the time to define your values. Yeah. Build good habits, yeah. Now, right? So that you can have those for the rest of your life. Now, 18 to 22, like you're in an impressionable time, right? Going into your first internships, your first jobs. If you're not intentional about what you want to stand for as a person, these are going to get defined for you. And they might get defined for you by your employer, by your peers, by society. I mean, that's one I don't necessarily want my values defined for me with, right? It's a pivotal time. The second reason, it's a funny thing. When you have clarity on your values, you don't really get surprised, When opportunity comes up, you just know it's right because it's now ingrained in you. And if it checks all the boxes, like you don't even need to go through that exercise. You just know. Right? The last thing I'd say, and we didn't talk about this today, but really defining your values, your guiding principles, those are the building blocks toward your purpose, right? Your calling, what you want to accomplish, the mark you want to make on your world and on the world, right? And I know we're in a time where anxiety is an epidemic. Like it's really hard to be anxious when you know what you believe in and you're living out a purpose that is exactly in line with who you are and who you want to be. So I want to leave you guys with a couple thoughts. Very simple thoughts, and actually summary thoughts. First is know who you are, right? This is the wiring of you and how you are unique and how you want to show up in the world. Second, know what you want to be. This is doing the work, right? Like we talked about. It's talking to people that are doing what you think you might want to do and spending the time and putting in the hours. Third, know what you stand for. This starts with defining your values. I hope that you leave here with that first draft, but I also hope that you don't, throw it in the trash can on the way out, right? Use this as a starting point. You still have more time to think about this and refine this, but then take it to another step. Start to define your guiding principles. What do these values mean in real life? And then set aside some time every week to sit down with these values, to sit down with these guiding principles, and see if you're walking the talk. And if you're not, make the necessary adjustments to get there, right? If you take these steps, the values that you most cherish will become the basis for your life. And that is the values-led life. And that's the best advice this stay-at-home dad has for you. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Very good. Thank you so much, David. David talked about what does it take to get this, to be recognized as the award recipient. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about officially what that means. Thank you again for the inspiring talk. And I think it's very encouraging to have something that you can look at and define your core values. The Robert C. McDermond Medal for Excellence in Entrepreneurship has many requirements, even just to be nominated for this highest award of the McDermond Center for Management and Entrepreneurship. Today, David Trogden will join former prestigious honorees that include, a couple you mentioned earlier, but Dan Hassler, David Becker, Judson Green, Al Hubbard that you mentioned, Jan Reese, Jeff Harmoning, Angie Hicks, Thomas Cooper, Megan Casey Glover, Justin Christian, and last year's recipient, Peter Rupert, just to name a few. To receive the honor, the recipient of the McDermond Medal must have demonstrated the following attributes. The individual has been instrumental in the formation or growth of an entrepreneurial business venture in a small or large organization. Check. They have demonstrated a long record of excellence in leadership and management. Check. As well as actively assisting others in establishing entrepreneurial businesses and initiatives. Ongoing, check, check, check. Doing that right now. And this individual is either a DePaul alumnus, a friend or supporter of DePaul, or a gracious supporter of the state of Indiana. Anyone who knows David, or has followed his life journey, as you now have got a taste of, can witness that today's recipient has been a living testimony and continues to be of these attributes. And now it is my pleasure to present Dr. Lori White, 21st President of DePaul University, to award David Trogden, 2004, with the Robert C. McDermond Medal for Excellence in Entrepreneurship.
David, I want to thank you for such a great talk. It was wonderful to hear your DePaul story, also learn more about your success in business. Also, thank you for being honest and reflective and encouraging us to think about our values. I did the homework assignment, and so my values are family, spirituality, winning, faith, relationships, connection, music, friendship, security, God, contribution, service, generosity, authenticity, compassion. And I didn't have giving back on my list, but I would have added that too. So thank you for encouraging all of us to think about our own values. And I now have the great pleasure of awarding you formally this medal. David, having demonstrated a lifetime career of entrepreneurship, advising, and investing, demonstrating impeccable leadership skills in managing high-growth organization, hosting countless DePaul student interns at Provo Medical, giving back to your alma mater and your community in so many ways, it is my privilege to award you, David Trogden, with the Robert C. McDermond Medal for Excellence in Entrepreneurship. Congratulations.
We're going to pose for a couple pictures, and then David will have about 10 or 15 minutes if you just want to come up and say hi to him. Again, thank you so much, Casey, for coming as well, and father-in-law Keith as well. So we appreciate your attendance, and hopefully one of these days, whether I'll be at DePaul or not, somebody out here in this audience is going to be nominated for the McDermond Medal 2044. I don't know. We'll see. But thanks again, David.